The protagonist recalled a question about whether it was wrong to fall in love with the heroine of the game. In the game, there were two heroines, but one of them was fated to die, and the only way to overturn that fate was to win against the losing event of inevitable defeat. Both of them had once called out his name and even saved him, so he believed that it was now his turn to save them all. The protagonist was using a giant armored robot that had swords on its head, and he thought that he would turn those swords into flowers. In the end, he defeated the enemies and secured the victory. A lady was hosting the game, which was called Night of the Giant, and it was the World Championship Season 6. She announced that the victory went to a player named Sword, who was the protagonist. The protagonist then took off his VR set while recalling that the game was called Night of the Giant, also known as COG, where players fought using robots that were also called COG. It was a very popular VR game worldwide. Kenya had just won the championship, which had been held online, and he was not particularly interested in the championship itself. However, the situation was different now because his interview was currently taking place. The host asked him how he was feeling. Kenya, who was trembling, said that he had a question. He asked whether there was any route to save both heroines, Kaguya and Raina, if the game had no route that allowed both of them to survive. The host became confused and wondered what she should do. Suddenly, Kenya asked if he could at least receive a hint, saying that even a simple yes or no would be fine. The host replied that the team match was about to start, so the interview would have to end. She thanked Kenya for the interview and began to hang up. Kenya asked her to wait, but she did not. Kenya felt disappointed and thought that he had been so desperate to ask about those two girls because they were not just heroines from the game, but also the saviors of his life, and he did not want to give up on them. Kenya then recalled the past. His parents had divorced when he was in middle school because both of them had someone else they liked, which was a common story. When he became a middle school student, he had tried hard to stop them, but neither of them changed. They both refused to take him in and instead gave him a small room along with child support. This happened just after he entered high school. Perhaps he had really been foolish, but after entering high school, he saved a classmate. However, that decision turned out badly because he became the new victim of those bullyings. The teachers did not know what to do with the bullies, and no one at school wanted to intervene. If it had been only one person, Kenya would not have worried about taking them on. He simply passed his days, waiting for them to get bored. However, he realized that the bullies disliked his attitude, and once they brutally injured him. He understood that bullying was extremely agonizing, but the feeling of loneliness was what truly broke his heart. In that world, there seemed to be no reason for him to live, as no one wanted him there or even called him by his name, Kenya, anymore. That was when he met those two heroines. The first was Kaguya, a girl who seemed cold but was actually very kind-hearted. The second was Raina, who was cool and emotionally reserved, yet always looked straight at Kenya. It was at that time that Kenya fell in love with both of them. The Battle Royale game, which had been his only hobby, finally released its story mode. He entered it and stopped going to school, living his life only to see those girls. They called out his name, and because of that, he truly felt saved. However, in the game, the moment came when both of them were going to die. Kaguya apologized, saying that because of her troublesome personality, she had not been able to say it before, but she loved Kenya. When Raina was dying, she wondered whether she would ever be able to smile properly. She hoped that Kenya would continue living, and she also confessed that she had feelings of love for him. Kenya cried bitterly at that moment, realizing that if he chose Raina, Kaguya would die, and if he chose Kaguya, Raina would die. That was when he understood that one of them always ended up dying. No matter how many different routes he tried or how many different playstyles he used, the heroine he chose would live while the one he did not choose would die. Kenya only wanted to live together with both of them. Even the creator had remained silent about the possibility of both heroines surviving, which made it seem impossible. However, he eventually discovered that there was one possible turning point, which was the early game losing event. After playing the game, Kenya lay down on his bed and read everyone's comments of it. People were saying that using a normal machine without a repair kit against mass-produced enemy machines meant that, no matter how anyone looked at it, it was clearly a losing event. Kenya also felt that it was impossible, and that it was not on a level where anyone could win. However, he thought that if there really was a way beyond that which would allow them to live together, then he would surely want to save them. After that, he picked up his VR set to play the game once again, saying that no one would ever discover a way unless they tried. He declared that he would do it, because it was now his turn to save them both. Kenya started the battle again and kept destroying the robots. He became furious as he continued killing those machines. After the match ended, he lay on the bed again and said that there was no way he could win such an impossible game and that he would take a break. However, when he thought about his parents, he realized that if he gave up now, Nothing would change from the past. He got up and picked up his VR headset again, saying that it was the only way left for him. He prepared himself once more and declared that no one should underestimate a lone gamer, and that when it came to time and determination, he had plenty of both. He thought that in order to overcome the event, he only needed greater piloting skills. He did everything he could and even improved his concentration by practicing blindfolded matches. He also figured out the enemy's algorithms and continued researching them thoroughly in order to save the two heroines. As he kept trying, 2 months passed. During his current attempt, he finally managed to destroy 90 enemies out of 100, leaving only 10 remaining. However, those 10 were the real problem because their movement patterns changed every time. As the enemies surrounded him, Kenya decided that he would give everything he had. He flew into the sky and used an improvised attack to strike down several more. He thought that he truly had to win and remembered Kaguya's words, where she had said that Kenya needed to become more loving. Kenya kept attacking the machines and managed to destroy 99 of them. He was filled with determination and declared that if there was a way to save them both, he would surely do it. Finally, he defeated the 100th robot as well and felt completely relieved that he had managed to accomplish it. He then received a congratulatory message for his fantastic victory. Kenya thought that there would probably be even greater challenges ahead. Soon, he saw a giant screen that asked whether he still had the will to change the world. Kenya became confused, but stated that he would change the world no matter how many times it took, as long as it was for the heroines he had fallen in love with. When he selected yes, a hole suddenly appeared beneath him. In the game, he fell into it, and in reality, he also fell because of the VR headset. He was confused and remarked that they had surely put a lot of effort into directing that scene because it had felt very real. After a while, he wondered when his headset had turned off. He became confused when he realized that everything was gone, including the controller. Soon he found a notice from the Asgard Knight Academy. Kenya was completely puzzled when he saw that it was an approval letter from the academy. While he was still confused, he heard a noise from outside. When he went to check, he saw Kaguya flying in the sky, which left him shocked. He wondered whether he had simply fallen asleep or something similar. He pinched himself and felt pain, which confirmed that he was not dreaming. He then realized that this was the world he had longed for and could only dream about, the one he had always looked up to even though he had believed it would never come true. Now that he had actually come to the world he had idealized, he wondered what he should do there. Kenya looked at the costume he had worn many times in the game, which was the Knight Academy uniform. He trembled as he wondered whether it truly was not just cosplay. Suddenly, a device rang. Kenya was confused and wondered if it was an in-game device. When he checked it, he learned that the entrance ceremony was at 9 a.m. and the current time was 8:16 a.m., which shocked him because he might be late. He quickly put on the uniform, saying that he would think about everything later. He then left his house. As he looked around, he felt that the surroundings did not seem very different from the world he originally lived in. Soon, he noticed a few students wearing the same uniform as him, so he assumed that the academy must be somewhere nearby according to the map. Suddenly, a car stopped nearby. A boy stepped out of it and took his bag from a man, saying that he would prefer to go to school alone. The man agreed and remarked that the boy's humor was unmatched. The boy was the second prince of the Asgard Empire, Lord Asgard. Lord walked forward with a serious expression, and as he passed by, people bowed before him, saying that he was a member of the royal family and a genius in combat who possessed both skill and character. He was admired by the Imperial Knight. Since Kenya did not pilot a cog, he did not leave much of an impression on anyone, but he remembered that Lord attended the school. A boy noticed that Kenya had not shown respect to Lord, so he walked over and punched Kenya, calling him a mere second-class Imperial citizen. Kenya looked dumbfounded and confused. The boy shouted at him, saying that he was not interested in Kenya's name and demanded to know whether the mark on Kenya's arm was proof that he was a second-class Imperial citizen. He then told Kenya to look around. When Kenya did, he saw that the second-class citizens were kneeling to show respect to the royal family. Kenya then remembered that it was that kind of world. The boy stated that being second class only placed Kenya slightly above the third class and that he was alive only by royal family. So he asked why Kenya was not showing gratitude. Kenya became frightened by the boy's intense glare and thought that there had surely been a similar scene in the game, like the one where a mob attacked at the beginning to teach the player about the world. Kenya realized that the situation was very bad and wondered why his legs would not move. He told himself to stop recalling the memories of being bullied. The boy grew annoyed and even drew his sword, asking whether Kenya intended to continue his defiance. However, Lord stepped forward and said that the academy was a place of learning and not worth bloodshed. The boy replied that Lord was being very kind, but it was necessary for Kenya to learn his place. He raised his sword again, saying that Kenya belonged to the inferior race of a defeated nation and should bow his head in the presence of royalty. Kenya was shocked by everything that was happening. Suddenly, a girl rushed forward and struck Kenya, apologizing as she said that he was a bit of an idiot and that she would make sure he learned his lesson, asking them to let the matter go. When Kenya tried to speak, she shouted at him to be quiet, placed her hand on his head, and forced him to kneel in front of Lord while asking him to apologize. Kenya did as she said. Lord forgave them and stated that he did not wish to see bloodshed early in the morning. The boy then sheathed his sword and said that since Lord had forgiven them, Kenya should be grateful for his mercy. As they left, the girl remarked that the morning match had turned into a disaster. She then turned to Kenya and asked if he was an idiot, saying that they had to go before the royal family or they would be executed for the disrespect. When Kenya looked at her, he realized that it was Kaguya, which shocked him, and she wondered if he had even been listening to her. Kenya suddenly started crying, which left Kaguya confused. All of a sudden, he hugged her, which made her feel embarrassed, so she punched him in annoyance and said that he was really a pervert. She then knocked him down, saying that he was not just an idiot, but also a pervert, and that she was now regretting helping him. Kenya, on the other hand, was so happy that he had really met Kaguya. He then got up, apologized, and said that Kaguya had reminded him of someone he had known who had passed away. He thanked her for saving him and extended his hand for a handshake, greeting her and reintroducing himself. She then forgot about the earlier incident and shook his hand, saying that everyone had their own struggles in that world and that she could somehow understand how Kenya felt. Kenya was truly shocked and happy that he was holding Kaguya's real hand. Kaguya continued by saying that she knew he did not want to bow down, but that he could not avoid, as she was just as furious inside as Kenya. However, she said that she would give him credit for his guts and that she was leaving now, adding that he should hurry up and leave as well. Kenya thanked her and called her Kaguya, which annoyed her, and she told him not to call her like that. Kenya apologized again, thinking that coming to that world had really made him so excited that he had forgotten that if things were the same as in the game, then the country once known as Yamato was now under the control of the Asgard Empire. At the entrance ceremony, some of the noble children were seated while the lower-class students stood behind them, and host Sieg stood in front of them, stating that those entering the academy would be granted second-class citizenship in the empire. However, he added that the privileges came with responsibilities, as they would have to train diligently to contribute to the growth of the empire. Kenya recalled that the Asgard Empire was a massive empire that controlled nearly half of the world's territory, and its ambition was to conquer the entire world, which had extended its grasp to Yamato. It was known that both the sky and land had become hunting grounds, and the Empire's tactical weapon of pride, the Knights of Giant, commonly known as Cog, had left them utterly powerless and defeated. The homeland, Yamato, had become the 13th colony of the Empire, and to subjugate the people of the conquered land, they were categorized into a hierarchy between the second and third classes, turning them into something like slaves of the empire. The host, Deepak, told the students that it was a great honor for him to stand before them and that he had been placed in charge of the Special District Knight Academy. Deepak then introduced himself and stated that he was the military attaché of Colony 13 and that he would evaluate them solely based on their abilities. He added that only their merit would matter and that the distinction between first class and second class meant nothing to him, as everyone would be expected to train equally under him. Kaguya listened to all of this and thought that Deepak, the former strongest knight in the kingdom, was now in charge. She knew this was coming, but it still felt troublesome. Suddenly, she noticed Kenya and was surprised because he was smiling. She then remembered how Kenya had behaved even in the presence of royalty, as his eyes had defied them and remained unwavering while staring straight at the enemy. After the ceremony, while she was walking, she wondered whether Kenya was a fool or a big shot. She then looked at a photo of herself with a boy and thought that if Kenya's eyes had been genuine, then he might be one of them. She was also confused about how Kenya knew her name. As she went to sit in the night department Class E, Kenya also came there, and she wondered if there was something behind all of it. Suddenly, Kenya sat next to her, which confused her, and she asked why he was sitting next to her. Kenya introduced himself again and greeted her, saying that he was looking forward to working together. She thought that she might have overestimated him and said that even if he greeted her with such straightforward eyes, she was not going to pretend that everything that had happened before never occurred. Kenya asked if they could get along with each other as Yamato people. She replied that she did not know whether he was an idiot, but he had better not use the term Yamato because it was punishable. Kenya was shocked and wondered if it was really that serious. Then, two men entered the class and told everyone to remain silent. Kaguya did not seem pleased to see them. They announced that Lord Asgard would be joining the class and that everyone should make sure there would be no disrespect toward him. When Lord entered the class, all the second-class students bowed down to show him respect, and Kenya did the same. Lord told everyone to be at ease, saying that he did not wish to disturb their training and that kneeling within the academy was no longer required. Kaguya wondered how Kenya could bow properly and speak like that when earlier he had not seemed used to it. He thought that, when in Rome, one should do as the Romans do, and he could not afford to die in such a place because he had something that he must accomplish. Kenya then moved closer to her and said that he would do whatever it took. She was confused by the look in his eyes, and as she wondered about it, she noticed that he was grabbing her hand. Thinking it might be some kind of new pickup attempt, she pinched his hand. Whatever it was, she did not want to make a scene there. She then sat back in her place and told him that if he was going to bother someone, he should choose someone else. Those words hit Kenya like a tsundere death blow, and he thought that it was the real power of such a response, feeling as though he was about to ascend to heaven. After that, he heard some of the students talking about the ice princess with long silver hair, so it had to be her, as her beauty certainly lived up to the rune. Kenya was shocked when he saw that lady. Kaguya told Kenya that even he knew who that lady was, though she was surprised that Kenya actually knew her. She explained that at the age of 16, that girl was said to be a Prodigy cog pilot on par with the Holy Knight. She was the daughter of the war god Sieg, the silver ice princess, Raina Sylphide. Kenya even started crying, thinking that it was the second heroine he wanted to save, and while crying, he said that it felt so real that he was able to meet Raina in real life. Kaguya became annoyed and pulled his ear, and Kenya said that Raina was truly beautiful and precious. He then told Kaguya that it really hurt. Kaguya shouted, asking why Kenya was looking so love-struck at a girl from the Empire. Kenya simply replied that a lot of things had happened. They then saw Raina come and sit next to Kenya. Kenya remained calm for a while, and the other students wondered if he was planning to talk to Raina. Some of them even felt that a second-class student like him was sticking his head out. Kenya calmly greeted Raina and introduced himself, but Raina, being cold, told him not to talk to her because she was not interested. It felt like a cold death to Kenya. Kaguya remarked that Kenya really had some guts. Kenya said that she was the ice princess, so she was supposed to be cool and solitary, and that was exactly how she was. Alfred then came forward to grab everyone's attention and introduced himself as their instructor, greeting everyone present. Just then he noticed that Lord was also there, so he bowed and asked for pardon, saying that he believed it might be inconvenient for Lord to be in the academy and that it was truly an honor for him to meet him. Lord calmly replied that he had entered the school because he selfishly wished to. So Alfred did not need to worry, as he had already told everyone in the class that he did not mind if they thought of him as a normal student. Kenya thought that the instructor must have been very tense because the prince had arrived without any announcement. Alfred thanked Lord and then began teaching, saying that as they all might know, they were there to strive to become pilots. He explained that he would teach them the skills needed to control the cog, the tactical weapon that was the pride of the Empire. Those who proved their abilities as pilots would be granted knighthood, and the first-class students were also expected to strive toward it while setting an example for the second-class students. The teacher then told the second-class students that it was still possible for them to reach knighthood depending on their abilities and that they just had to do their best. He said that it was enough for the orientation and asked everyone to check their schedules on their devices. First, they would begin with the COG simulator, where their aptitude would be evaluated. As all the students were taken to that area, Alfred said that as long as they had read the manuals distributed beforehand, they should be able to handle it. Kenya, while looking at the battle, thought that it was a shame it was not the real thing, but he was still getting excited. He was confused to see some students looking worried, so he asked Kaguya why everyone looked so glum. She seemed annoyed and told him to just watch, saying that he would understand it on his own because it was just a show for sick freaks. Alfred asked the students to start immediately and told them to come up to the simulator. They then watched two robots fighting, and they could barely keep up with their movements. When one robot struck the other, the winner called the opponent a loser and told him to go back and memorize all the controls. As it continued, Kenya observed that the gap in power was huge and said that it looked more like a warning. Kaguya replied that the first-class students had practiced beforehand, while for the second-class students it was their first time, so it was not even worthy of being called a match. Teacher Alfred then called out to the students and asked why they were standing there. Two students began battling in the simulator, but when one of them hesitated, Alfred shouted and pushed the boy's head down, telling him not to waste his time. When the boy admitted his loss, Alfred shouted that his voice was too soft and that his choice of words was incorrect according to the textbook. The boy then loudly declared that it was his loss and thanked him for guiding a second-class student. A boy named Good commented that it was good and said that the boy would now live the rest of his life submitting to them. Alfred then called Good and Kaguya for the next round. Good wished her good luck and said that he would guide her very well himself. She went up and sat in the simulator, saying that she had memorized the entire manual and the controls, so it should be fine. As the countdown began, she encouraged herself. On the other hand, Good was looking forward to seeing someone who tried to act tough like her end up crying in frustration. Finally, their battle began, and Kaguya rushed forward to strike Good. He appreciated her spirit and said that it was a very good She replied that she would give it her all and that Good should not underestimate her. As she attacked, he simply turned and used his leg to make her robot fall, then teased her by asking if it was already over and telling her to entertain him a little more, as it would be boring to end it there. Kaguya struggled, while a few students watched and told Good not to go too far, saying it would be pitiful if he bullied her. The battle continued for a while, and some students told Kaguya to just give up, saying that she was only a second-class student and was trying too hard. Raina watched everything and thought that Kaguya was improving in many aspects. Kaguya herself thought that she was starting to get a hold of how to control the cog, and she finally managed to land a hit on Good. Kenya also appreciated the move, but Good did not seem pleased about it. The students watched nervously and wondered if it would look bad if Good lost to a second-class girl. Instructor Alfred also wondered if Good was trying to disgrace himself in front of Lord and questioned why he was playing around and taking so long. Kenya then became confused and noticed that the damage input seemed strange. The damage dealt should have been the same, but Kaguya was receiving more damage. Alfred seemed uneasy and muttered something about being forced to work harder. Kenya wondered what he was mumbling about. Suddenly, Kenya noticed Alfred doing something and realized that he was adjusting the handicap system to alter the damage input. Alfred did not want Kaguya to win and had gone so far as to manipulate the system. It felt strange because Kaguya should have been able to push through with her attacks, yet she could not. Good confidently said that there was no way a second-class student could win. He then struck her robot and finally defeated her. The students praised Good for the close call, and one of them said that he had gotten chills thinking Good might actually lose. Good wiped his sweat and claimed that he had simply given his opponent a bit of the spotlight because he was a philanthropist. Kaguya came by, saying that it was strange and that everything was extremely weird. Kenya asked her to calm down, but she resisted and went to teacher Alfred, saying that Good had done something and that the damage input had been strange halfway through the game, so she had not expected such an unfair result. Suddenly, Alfred slapped her, causing blood to come out of her mouth. He glared at her and told her not to get the wrong idea, saying that whether she approved of it or not did not matter, and that the loser would simply bow to the winner and admit defeat. He added that they had even lost the entire empire to them, so the losers had to listen to the winners. He also said that if she refused, there would be no place for her in that world. Good then came forward and told her that if she did not like it, she should just go back to being third class, which was a life worse than stalking, and was waiting for her. As everyone looked at her, she started crying, and they told her not to cry because it made it seem as though they were bullying her. Good said that he was only teaching her the rules of that world. Meanwhile, Kenya grew angry, thinking that he had only just come to that world and that he should lie low for the time being and do nothing. Good grabbed Kaguya's cheeks and said that her face was not bad and that he might make her his exclusive slave. He added that if she served him well, she would be allowed to give birth to a child, and in that way, her child would become first class, so she would have no regrets. He concluded that it would be good for her and told her to bow her head. She then said that it was her loss, and since Good would not listen, she began to say it loudly, but Kenya stopped her, telling her that she did not have to do that because it was clearly her victory. Kenya thought that there was still a lot he did not, and that he should not just stand there doing nothing. Good did not seem pleased and said that it had just been getting to the good part, but Kenya interrupted and asked what he meant. Kenya called Good by his name, which Good said was disrespectful. Kenya replied that he only wanted to ask for some guidance. Good then acted cool and asked what it was that he wanted. Kenya thought that Kaguya could have simply left him alone that morning, but she had not, and the one he loved had not changed, even in that world. He thought that what he had to do was protect his wings, which was something he was supposed to do. He then said that if he lost, he would do anything and would even kneel naked in front of Good. Good replied that he was not interested in seeing Kenya like that, but Kenya stated that if Good lost, he would never lay a finger on Kaguya ever again. Good became angry and shouted at Kenya not to get so cocky, saying that he was only second class and that Good would make him his slave forever. Kenya agreed and told him to keep his promise. Kaguya told them to wait and said that there was no need for Kenya to get involved in all of that, but Kenya stopped her and said that she should just let him return the favor from the morning. He then turned to Instructor Alfred and asked whether he minded. Alfred was worried because Kenya seemed confident, which left him confused, and he could not allow anything to happen in front of Lord. However, He said that there would be no problem as long as the handicap system was. After that, he agreed. Kenya said that everything was fine and asked Kaguya to trust him because he would surely win. Hearing this, she remembered a boy who had once said the same words to her. Kenya then entered the simulation, thinking that it was his first time doing so since coming to that world, yet he had already made such a bold statement. He realized that the real cockpit looked exactly like the one in the game. Now he thought that Good would properly welcome him. Kenya was ready in the cockpit as he checked his equipment, which included a gun, a shield, and a one-handed sword, all of which were fixed and could not be changed. He grabbed the controller that he was used to gripping, tools that he had seen even more often than the faces of his parents. It was his first time doing it in reality. It was not his first time experiencing it. The cockpit truly felt like the most comfortable place for him. As the countdown finished, Kenya continued standing still, which left everyone confused as they wondered why he was not moving. One boy felt worried and thought that a second-class student could not possibly win against them. The high-class students mocked him, saying that Kenya had talked so much but was not even moving in the battle. A girl said that it would all be over in an instant. Good prepared his weapon and wondered how he should beat Kenya. He thought that Kenya seemed very confident, but there was no way he could lose to a second-class student. He wondered whether Kenya had only been bluffing earlier and was now so scared that he could not even move. Kenya looked at the controls and found that everything was working perfectly and moved as if they were his own arms and legs. However, he still did not know everything that he could do in that world. Good then jumped forward with his sword and shouted that Kenya's life would end now. Kenya realized that there was at least one thing he knew how to do. When Good landed his strike, he discovered that Kenya was not there and became confused. Kenya appeared from the side and slashed off the head of the robot Good was using, defeating it. Kenya then said that he was the strongest player in the entire world. Everyone was shocked to see that Kenya had won the match. Alfred was also stunned, as Kenya had struck perfectly from the blind spot and had moved so fast that Alfred had not even been able to apply the handicap. Alfred then told the students that it would not count because the simulator had malfunctioned. The students agreed, saying that there was no way Good could have lost. Raina wondered whether it had really been the malfunctioning. Good laughed and said that it had truly surprised him. He then attacked again, saying that such a thing was unbelievable. Alfred applied a handicap to the system and thought that one shot from Good would reduce all of Kenya's HP. However, the result was completely different, as Good's attacks could not hit Kenya while Kenya kept attacking him. Some students said that Kenya must have done something unfair. Kenya moved at high speed and said that Good was the one who was cheating. He then shot Good's robot again. Even Kaguya was shocked, wondering how Kenya could make the robot move so smoothly. Good fell there injured, and Kenya cracked his knuckles, saying that they should end it now and see how much he could reproduce with the simulator. He then raged up, and Raina already felt that something was coming. All of a sudden, Kenya disappeared and attacked Good with a lightning flurry, which decreased Good's entire HP and allowed Kenya to win. Kenya cracked his knuckles and relaxed, stating that it was still not as good as the game yet and that he had only tried it because he really wanted to try out more things. Every second-class student was very happy at that moment to see Kenya's victory, but the teacher, Alfred, was not pleased, as he had not expected Kenya to win. He wondered whether Kenya truly belonged to the second class because, without receiving special training, Kenya was already at the level of a holy knight or even higher. They all wondered who Kenya really was and what he actually was. The students appreciated Kenya, saying that he was the hope of them all, which left the first-class students stunned. Kaguya then came to Kenya and thanked him, after which Kenya asked for a kiss as a reward. She was shocked, and as she was about to beat him, he revealed that he had only been joking and said that they should call each other by their first names. She stopped and remarked that Kenya was truly remarkable, so stable and special, and that he could call her whatever he wanted. Kenya then received her thanks once again. Meanwhile, Good came out trembling and said that it was not supposed to be like that, before suddenly falling down. Alfred then asked some students to bring Good to the clinic. He seemed extremely angry about this situation and announced Kenya as the winner, asking if anyone wanted to show him the might of the Empire. No one said anything, and suddenly Raina stepped forward, saying that she would be Kenya's opponent and wondering if he would mind. Kenya replied that he did not mind being her opponent. Raina then called his name and said that she would correct her earlier statement, as she was now interested in him. Kenya acted playfully and asked what she would do for him if he won. She became angry and asked whether he intended for her to get on her knees. Kenya denied it, saying that it was just a joke, and asked her to call him by his name as he simply wanted to be able to call her by her. She was confused and wondered whether that was truly his wish. As she looked at him, she thought that although she had expected such a reaction, it was still something special to her. She then said that she did not understand, but she was ready. Kenya became excited and said that he would do his best. Kaguya then pulled his ears and Kenya complained that it really hurt. Alfred then spoke to Raina, saying that he would leave it to her and that she must already be aware that they could not allow the second class to become the top of the school no matter what. He added that they could not allow any more disgrace in front of Lord and that she should show the abilities of the first class. Raina replied that she had no need for his unnecessary consideration and that if he did anything unwarranted, she would immediately stop the fight and report it to the higher authorities. Alfred became annoyed but agreed to her words. Kenya and Raina then prepared for the fight. Kenya said that he hoped they would get along, but she replied that she had no intention of being friendly with him. Kenya thought that it was exactly as he had expected. As he still could not get her to get along with him, he then wondered what he could do in his current state. As the battle began, he realized that she had already moved to an incredible level and attacked him from behind, saying that it was disappointing and that he was supposed to have been completely out of sight. Kenya thought that he had simply let his guard down and that it had been very close. He replied that it had indeed been out of sight, like a blindfold, which was why he had already determined all the blind spots of the cog and could calculate which one would be targeted based on the position before disappearing. He added that if someone were going for a single strike, they would aim for the cockpit, which meant the sword's movement would also be limited. Raina was truly shocked, because all of those things were correct. She attacked him again, thanking him and saying that revealing his tricks to his opponent like that meant Kenya was quite confident in himself. Kenya replied that even if he had not said it, she would have realized it by herself. He added that he was actually thankful that like that, and that it was only a matter of sooner or later. Raina said that Kenya spoke as if he knew everything well, and she added that she would now deal with him and his jokes. As everyone watched, they realized that Kenya and Raina were on completely different levels. Kaguya thought that they were 100 times better than good, and compared to them, she was still far behind. As Kenya and Raina continued battling, Kenya appreciated her movements but thought that there was still much to improve. She struggled and remarked that Kenya was very strong. When she mentioned her father, Kenya felt strangely happy upon hearing that word, and his heart felt shaken. However, he quickly regained his senses and focused on fighting her again, wondering whether it would really be fine for him to win like that. He remembered that the second class was already treated badly, so if he became the top of the class, no one knew how badly he would be bullied. Moreover, they might even consider him a dangerous person, and he could be assassinated. His body then moved on its own. Kaguya had once been in trouble, but if Kenya gained even more attention, it would become difficult for him to move freely. Therefore, he thought that this was a good chance and felt sorry for Raina. He deliberately created an opening, and Raina noticed that the pressure of his sword had weakened. She realized that there was an opening, but she was still confused about whether it might be a trap. Nevertheless, she attacked Kenya to defeat him, while Kenya thought that sadly being called by his name would not happen now because there was something he had. When Raina won the match, everyone from the upper class was extremely happy. Alfred even clapped and said that it was as expected of the daughter of the war god. Afterward, when they came out, Lord thought about Kenya and felt that there was surely some mystery about him. A boy remarked that although they had lost, Kenya had fought very well against the Ice Princess, and they all felt that Kenya was amazing. However, Kaguya felt that there had been something strange about Kenya's movements at the last moment. Raina also wondered whether she had actually been invited to attack and whether he had taken pity on her. She then came out of the cockpit angrily and grabbed Kenya by the collar, asking what that had meant. Kenya bowed in front of her, accepted his loss, and thanked her for guiding him. Everyone began laughing at the scene. Raina shouted, asking why Kenya was doing that when he was clearly far better. Kenya asked her to calm down and said that she would understand it in the future. She was completely confused. She then turned and apologized, saying that she had not been thinking clearly enough. Kenya said that if it was just the two of them, they could settle it later. She thought of it, then turned back, pointed at him, and said that it was a promise, asking him to make sure he kept it. Finally, she called him by his name, which brought a warm smile to his face. Kenya even started crying when he heard his name from Raina's mouth. He thought that things had not gone as expected, but it had still worked out. He had assumed that she would hate him, yet he had barely managed to get through the situation and had even arranged a meeting with just the two of them. He wondered whether it was basically a date or not, leaving him confused. Raina then excused herself from the first-class students, asking if she could have some time alone for a while. Kapik? She gave them a sharp stare and said that they had been wasting too much effort on beginners and that they should fight more like first-class students. She added that if they could not manage that, she would take them on herself. Everyone was shocked by her words. Because of her scolding, the bullying-style fights stopped. However, no one managed to defeat a first-class student after that, but the defeats no longer felt as shameful as before, although the frustration of losing remained. After witnessing that single match and victory, everyone's spirits seemed to be lifted. In Kenya's previous world, he had been completely alone, but in this world, things were a little different. Back in class, Alfred finished his teaching and told everyone that real training would begin the next day. He asked them to prepare themselves for some serious drills. He then pointed a finger at Kenya, called him by his full name, and warned that just because Kenya was a bit capable, he should not let his head swell. Other students said that Kenya was completely doomed and that the instructor had his eyes on him. Kenya became irritated and remarked that he had really stood out too much. Kaguya packed her bag and stood up, saying that the teacher had only asked Kenya to do that to save his own face, and that she was leaving now. Kenya quickly stood up to stop her, but Raina suddenly looked at him and mentioned meeting after class. Kenya thought that he had already received an invitation from her, which made him very happy. However, his current priority was Kaguya. So he apologized to Raina, saying that he already had plans. As he was about to leave, she asked whether they could exchange contact information, but Kenya apologized again, explaining that he was in a hurry and suggesting that they meet the next day instead. Kenya chased after Kaguya and asked her to stop. She turned around and asked what had happened. Kenya took a breath and said that he had been wondering whether she would like to have tea with him. There were many things he wanted to ask her about. She looked confused and asked which pervert had been swooning over the Imperial girl earlier. Kenya hesitated and replied that there were deeper reasons behind it. He then thought that perhaps it had been a mistake to get involved with both of them so quickly and added that someone like him should not have done that. She blushed slightly and said that it was not that she did not want to, but that the day was not ideal, so they could go another day instead. Kenya was shocked and asked if she was serious. When she agreed, she noticed that Kenya had started crying and became confused, wondering whether it was really something worth crying about. Kenya replied that he did not know why he was so happy. She was completely confused to see such emotions from him. Kenya thought that it should not have been a big deal, as being rejected had always been normal for him, and being alone was what he had always done. However, having someone who wanted to spend time with him gave him a truly joyful feeling. He then moved his device toward her and asked to exchange contact information. She hesitated and said that it seemed as if she was being taken advantage of, but she still agreed to exchange contact information and called him a strange guy. After that, she went to her room, thinking that she was exhausted from the first day and that she would rest early. Suddenly, she sensed something and noticed that even the traps in her room had been avoided and that the window was open. She wondered whether her real identity had been discovered. Suddenly, someone attacked her from behind with a knife in a surprise attack. However, she dodged it, grabbed his hand, twisted it, and threw him down, asking whether it was not rude to sneak into a maiden's room through the window. As the person mentioned something about having tapped earlier, Kaguya realized that it was none other than her father. He said that even though she had been a bit lax with her vigilance, it seemed that she had not slackened in her training. After that, she released him, and as he sat down, she prepared some tea and asked whether he had come there to tease her without giving any notice. Her father replied that even though it was for the sake of Yamato, he could not help worrying about his daughter attending the Empire's school, and he only wanted to see whether everything was fine. She said that she had received a warm welcome and that the people back in the slums had it much harder. Compared to that, this was nothing. She added that she was risking her life as one of the Amaterasu as well. They were members of the Yamato Liberation Alliance, a resistance group led by former Yamato Army Lieutenant General Akagami Ishin, who was Kaguya's father. Together with the survivors of the former Yamato Army scattered across Colony 13, they continued fighting to reclaim Yamato. Ishin agreed with Kaguya, saying that if anything happened to her, he would not be able to face her mother or Jin. Kaguya replied that Ishin had already said that many times and then asked for the real reason he had come there, as she felt it must be something very important. He agreed that it was indeed something big and mentioned that the Taikyoku Federation was making a move. Kaguya understood that it was finally time to reclaim Yamato. The Federation was a coalition of countries led by the Asian superpower Chubu, and it was the largest confederation in the world excluding the Asgard Empire. Ishin said that it had been 5 years since the occupation of the Yamato Empire, and all they had been able to do was defend. But with the support of Chubu, it was time for them to go on the offensive. Kaguya, filled with rage, declared that they would avenge everyone and make sure it was done. Ishin said that this was the reason they were planning an operation soon, as they were scheduled to seize the cog being transported from the Asgard Empire, which would demonstrate their strength and allow them to negotiate as equals with Chubu. He added that the cogs would be crucial for that operation and that he needed her to become more proficient with them. She then revealed that she had met someone interesting who was very strong and was a Yamato native. Isshin wondered what kind of person she was talking about. She replied that at least among all of them, she did not think anyone could defeat him, and he might even be stronger than the Silver Eyes Princess herself. Isshin stated that someone like that rarely appeared except at the turning points of an era, so if monstrous figures like those of Lord emerged, perhaps it was no coincidence that Yamato also had such a prodigy. Suddenly, Kaguya's face turned red as she thought about how kind Kenya. Her father wondered why her face had turned red, but she simply replied that it was nothing. Her father then added that if Kenya was truly that strong, he would like to recruit him as an ally. Kaguya responded that it would ultimately be up to Kenya to decide. Her father agreed and remarked that if only Kaguya had a good body, he guessed it was the one thing she had not inherited from her mother. Kaguya became furious and said that if Isshin had something to say, he should just go ahead and say it directly. As he was beaten by her, he wondered what she could possibly expect from a sleazy old man like him. She, still annoyed, stated that jokes aside, she really needed to assess what kind of man Kenya truly was. Isshin told her that if she thought she could trust him, she should bring him, as he trusted her intuition as much as he trusted his own. She agreed with that. The scene then shifted to Kenya's room, where he was lying down, thinking that too many things had happened at once which had truly exhausted him. However, it was real that he had come to the world of Cog. He knew about that world from the game, but he came to realize that knowing about it was only superficial knowledge. For everyone else, it was reality, and it was not enough to simply fight in the Cog like in the game. In the original storyline, he had never helped Kaguya or fought with Raina, but the main plot seemed to have remained unchanged, and Kenya had to avoid becoming unable to predict future developments. While the scenarios advanced steadily, he realized that he needed to actively engage with them to change the future that was bound to come. However, that was not the only reason, as he knew what lay at the end of the storyline if it continued unchanged, and the worst outcome would result in many deaths. He remembered a war waged by the Empire of Asgard, an event that would involve the entire world, and he truly did not want to even think about the outbreak of that world war. He then chose to take that path, deciding not to give it much thought, even including Raina, who was the daughter of the strongest knight in the Empire. In the game, she would not even bat an eye at Kenya no matter what he tried. However, after that day, he somehow had an idea of how to get closer to her. Kaguya was a member of the resistance rebelling against the Empire, known as the Yamato Liberation Alliance, and Kenya could not simply tell her to quit the alliance. He knew how badly the resistance had treated her during the training, and she would probably never find us unless she retook Yamato. They were meant to be enemies from the start, an entrenched fate where rescuing one would doom the other. He thought about rising through the ranks of the Empire while making sure the resistance gained something out of it, and he wondered if he would be able to balance those two delicate goals. People often said that if someone chased two rabbits, they would end up catching neither. Still, he believed he had to do it if it meant saving both heroines. After coming out of the bath, Kenya received a notification and guessed that it might be from Raina. When he checked, it was indeed from her asking him to promise to meet her in front of the simulation chamber the next day at 7 a.m. Kenya understood that it was only for business, which was very much like her, and he even thought that she might have sent it to the wrong person. By the next morning, at around 7 to 7:06 a.m., when Kenya arrived, Raina did not seem happy and mentioned that he was 6 minutes. Kenya apologized for being late and explained that he had been busy researching that world, which had prevented him from getting proper sleep, and that he used to be a complete night owl in his old world. She warned him to fix his sleeping habits and arrive on time, adding that she had very limited time in the morning and that he should make sure not to be late again. Kenya felt happy hearing her words and thought that although she might act cold, she was actually quite a battle maniac. And that contrast was exactly what made her so appealing. She thought that Kenya looked so sleepy that he was almost unrecognizable from the previous day and wondered if the earlier impression had just been a fluke. She then used her card and asked him to promise that when they trained together, he should give his all. Kenya responded with a scary smile and told her not to cry about it later. She became embarrassed and warned him not to look down on her. Kenya laughed and said that she did not need to get so flustered. She called him rude and wondered if there was something so funny about her. Kenya replied that it was only because he had never seen that side of her before and that he had not intended to mock her. She turned away, thinking that she could not keep herself together when she spoke with Kenya, as she always got caught up in his that perhaps all of it was part of his tactics. Then she pointed a finger at him and made it clear that Kenya was the loser while she was the challenger. Kenya tightened his grip on his shirt and said that the look in her eyes was so nice that it fired him up. After that, they continued their morning practice. Kenya then attended his lessons, and the new environment made him recall familiar feelings. In the blink of an eye, a few days had already passed. While all the students were running, Teacher Alfred shouted at a few of those who were falling behind and mentioned that piloting a cog really required stamina. Sal rested for a while and thought that he had very little stamina. Kaguya offered Kenya some water and commented that although Kenya was really good at piloting a cog, he still looked quite pitiful. While Kenya was drinking, Kaguya asked what he was going to do, saying that she could tell the way Raina looked at him was becoming meaner, day by day. Kenya admitted that he felt intense pressure from Raina. Kaguya suggested that he should just go and apologize to her, but Kenya replied that Raina herself had told him to go all out, and when he did, he ended up winning every match against her. Kaguya remarked that they seemed to get along very well. Kenya teased her by asking if she was jealous. She became annoyed upon hearing that. Alfred then called all of them and told them that it was time to stop for this. Kenya felt happy hearing that because the next day was a day off. Suddenly, both Raina and Kaguya called Kenya. As they exchanged glances with each other, Raina stated that she had something to discuss with Kenya and wondered who Kaguya even was. Kaguya then asked Kenya to tell her that they already had plans for the next day. Kaguya wondered why a lady of the Empire would be so obsessed with a second-class loser like Kenya. Raina looked deeply into Kaguya's eyes and replied that it was none of Kaguya's business what her relationship with Kenya was and asked if Kaguya was Kenya's girlfriend. Kaguya felt embarrassed and pointed at Kenya, asking who would ever go for a pervert like him. She then turned to Kenya and asked what they really were. Kenya hesitated because he did not know what to say and had even forgotten about the whole matter. He asked both of them to calm down, but Raina turned to him and reminded him that he had promised they would fight whenever she wanted. Kaguya wondered if he actually wanted to go on a date with her. Hearing that, Raina asked if Kaguya was Kenya's girlfriend, but Kaguya denied it. Kenya felt confused by the chaos and realized that if he did not handle the situation properly, it would end badly for him, yet he also knew that he could not handle it easily. As the two continued arguing, Kenya stated that he would leave for now and suggested that the three of them should spar together the next day and that the winner would decide what they would do afterward. Kaguya and Raina looked at each other. Raina said that as long as she could fight against her, she did not mind. Kaguya also agreed that she would be happy with that. Kenya confirmed that it was decided. However, when he raised his hand, both of them grabbed him and asked whose side he was going to choose. Kenya struggled because he understood that both of them were strong, especially as soldiers, so he could not run away from them. He suddenly got an idea, and the three of them went to the simulation area. They were glad that both Kaguya and Raina were with him because otherwise Kenya and Kaguya, being from the second class, would not have been allowed to enter the simulation. Raina opened the simulation and remarked that the teacher had looked very displeased when a second-class student had asked about it. Kaguya added that Alfred had seemed completely angry. Raina admitted that she knew it was national policy, but she could not help feeling that things had gone too far recently. Kenya asked Raina if she really did not mind the second class at all. She replied that she had never once thought of them as inferior, but she was not foolish enough to rebel against the Emperor. She then said that there had been enough talk and told them to start. The three of them entered the simulation. Raina mentioned that dual-wielding swords was Kenya's strong point. Kaguya wondered if that meant he had not been serious until then. Kenya replied that he had already been going all out, but it seemed he would have to put in even more effort that day. Both of them attacked Kenya, saying that the first step was to eliminate the strongest one. However, after they struck, they realized that Kenya was no longer there. He counterattacked and commented that their attack had been good but not good enough to defeat him, as they would not be able to hit him with something like. After the battle, Kenya defeated both of them and suggested that they end it there. They exited the simulation, and Raina complained that Kenya had been winning only by running away. Kenya replied that they had still managed to land a hit on him that day. Kaguya added that the two of them had only managed to land a single hit on him at the end. Raina did not seem happy, but said that since it was the rule they had made, she would give up for that day. Kenya thanked her for it. Kaguya then extended her hand to Raina and said that it had really been a good practice, so Raina deserved thanks as well. Raina acted coldly and replied that fighting with Kaguya did not even serve as practice for her. Kenya felt bad and noticed that Kaguya became annoyed, saying that Raina had rushed in the moment she was taunted and had fought like a beast. Raina responded that the one attack Kaguya had landed was actually very good. Kaguya then calmed down and thanked her for it. Kenya understood that Kaguya was really easy to handle, and somehow it felt like the two of them had begun to get along a little better, which made the effort worthwhile. Still, Raina remarked that if Kaguya could always move the way she had earlier, she might at least serve as a decent warm-up partner. Once again, Kaguya became annoyed and asked what Raina was even trying to say. Kenya tried to calm Kaguya down and suggested that they should leave. Kaguya asked where they were going. Kenya replied that Kaguya herself had suggested going on a date. Kaguya blushed at that, and Kenya wondered why she was acting like a cat. They then took their leave from Raina. As Kenya pushed Kaguya along with him, she warned him to watch where he put his hands. Kenya simply told her that they should get going. Raina seemed as if she had something to say, but she held herself back and just watched them leave. Suddenly, she felt a heaviness in her chest and wondered if she had caught a cold, thinking that she only needed to return the card. Alfred had been watching everything from hiding and thought that it might be better to report that irregularity to Sig. As Kenya walked with Kaguya through the market, she continued acting like a cat, and Kenya wondered if the date had only been an excuse and whether Kaguya actually had something she wanted to talk about with. She hesitated and then said that she would not mind going on a date with him. Kenya felt shocked and thought that he had messed up, realizing that he could have simply gone along with it, but he still needed her to talk with him. The scene shifted back about 5 years earlier, shortly after the occupation of Yamato. Many areas were still unstable for habitation, and fearing the rampage of lawless imperial soldiers, people had begun living in hiding. Around a lake, many people were talking among themselves and wondering whether it was really true that people had been kidnapped. Someone mentioned that he had heard it from an imperial knight. Kaguya and her brother Jin were also among the crowd. Jin remarked that things had become very heavy to carry. Kaguya replied that she could carry that much by herself. Jin responded that he knew she was already 10 years old and mentioned that their father had gone to look for food, but he wondered what they would do in the meantime. Suddenly, Kaguya's stomach growled, and Jin looked at her. She felt embarrassed and insisted that it was not her stomach rumbling. Jin laughed and said that she did not have to hide it, then gave her a snack. Kaguya refused and claimed that she was currently on a diet. Jin teased her, saying that if that were true, she would not have been groaning with hunger. He added that she was still in her growth phase and placed the snack in her mouth while apologizing, which annoyed her. When he asked if it tasted good, she admitted that it did. Jin said that he would make sure she could eat properly, and Kaguya thanked him, saying that although life was very hard, as long as their family supported each other and endured together, she hoped that happy times would come again. While walking, Kaguya suggested that waiting for their father would only waste time and proposed that they should search for food themselves. Jin warned her not to go too far. At that moment, she noticed a strange-looking man, and suddenly their world seemed to turn into hell. The man grabbed Kaguya and placed a knife against her. He warned Jin to stay where he was if he did not want his cute sister to die. Jin asked if they were kidnapping her. The man confirmed it, saying that women from Yamato, especially young ones, were very popular among perverted nobles. Jin became furious and told Kaguya that he would definitely save her. However, another man suddenly appeared and stabbed Jin in the chest, saying that they did not need brave men like him. Jin collapsed in front of Kaguya's eyes. She was shocked and began crying as she saw her brother being killed. The man continued holding her tightly and would not let her go. The other man said that it could cause trouble if Kaguya kept making noise and suggested that they should hurry and take her away. The first man stopped him and suggested that they should try Kaguya first. He even tore off her upper clothing and said that before handing her over to the nobles, it would be good to test the poison. Kaguya was terrified as the man approached, saying that he could not hold himself back. He admitted that acting so wildly toward young girls would normally be a crime in his homeland, but things were different now, and he could do it without worry. The other man urged him to finish quickly and wondered what was so special about Kaguya anyway. Suddenly, Jin got up and stabbed one of them from behind, warning them not to underestimate the people of Yamato. After killing him, Jin rushed toward the man who was assaulting Kaguya, shocking him. At the same time, Kaguya kicked the man in his most vulnerable spot, causing him intense pain. As she ran toward Jin, the man, filled with rage, attempted to shoot her with his gun. Jin stepped in front of her and took the shot, saying that he had promised his mother that he would protect Kaguya even at the cost of his life. The man became furious that someone like Jin dared to act that way and said that Jin should remember his place. He added that since they had rebelled against imperial soldiers, no one would complain no matter what he did to them. At that moment, their father suddenly appeared and slashed the man, declaring that they were not alone. They then checked on Jin, and Kaguya asked what they should do now. Jin apologized to their father for messing everything up. When other soldiers began approaching, Isshin supported Jin and urged them to leave quickly. Jin was struggling badly, and as they moved, blood continued to trail behind them. Isshin said that he would protect both of them, but Jin replied that it was fine. He then pushed his father away, leaving Isshin confused about what he was planning. Jin revealed that he was holding a grenade and said that he could not go any farther and that they already knew what he intended to do. Isshin shouted at him, but Jin angrily replied that Isshin had the important duty of taking Yamato back and that he could not allow him to die there. He also declared that he would never let Kaguya fall into the hands of those bastards. Kaguya insisted that she would stay with Jin, but Jin gave her his overcoat and apologized for scaring her. He told her that many hardships would come in the future and that there might be times when she would want to die, but she must promise never to give up. He said that nothing was more important than surviving, and that this was also the reason they had to take Yamato back. He asked his father to promise to take Kaguya away and live on. Isshin, filled with sorrow, said that he and Kaguya were both proud of Jin and promised that he would surely take Yamato back. Isshin left with Kaguya, and although she resisted, he tightened his grip and began running away. Kaguya cried and begged Jin not to leave her. That was the last time. It was the day she lost him and made up her mind to swear retribution against the empire that had taken everything from her. Ever since then, she had carried on her brother's wish to reclaim Yamato for everyone. Kenya listened to everything she said and wondered whether it was wise for her to join the resistance. She replied that she had only infiltrated the school for that purpose. Kenya thanked her for telling him and said that he would join the resistance as well. She was surprised to hear such a decision and warned him that his life would be in danger and that he might have to kill people. Kenya replied that it was fine because he was the strongest and that it would be better than simply letting Kaguya die. Kaguya became emotional and thanked him, saying that she had thought he would say something like. Kenya felt pleased that everything seemed to be going well as he had first managed to become Kaguya's ally. Suddenly, he began to feel sleepy. Kaguya revealed that the drug had finally taken effect and told him not to worry because it was only a sleeping pill. Kenya wondered why she had done such a thing. She explained that she wanted to trust him, but a part of her still could not trust him completely. Kenya felt shocked and thought that he had been aiming too hard for the shortest route and had not yet gained enough affection point. Kaguya thought that since Kenya now knew about the resistance, there was no going back, and she apologized to him. After some time, when Kenya woke up, he found himself tied to a chair in a strange room. Confused, he wondered what was going on. Then he remembered that he had been eating curry with Kaguya before suddenly feeling sleepy, and that she had mentioned the drug. A man entered and said that Kenya was finally awake. He explained that he did not want to be so rough with him, but given the circumstances, he had to be careful. Kenya was surprised to see the man because he was Kaguya's father, Isshin, who greeted Kenya while sitting there. Isshin said that he had heard Kenya had been taking good care of Kaguya at the school, so he expressed his gratitude by thanking him. Kenya was shocked to see Isshin bowing his head and asked him to raise it, saying that he had only done what anyone would have done. Isshin appeared relaxed and his first impression seemed to be good. Isshin then moved to the main issue and glared at Kenya as he asked who he really was. Kenya felt frightened under his intense gaze. The scene then shifted to a building from which Kaguya and a boy came out while carrying boxes. The boy told her that she had been acting like that ever since she returned, and he wondered what was wrong with her. She replied that she was the one who had brought Kenya, but her father had said that he would talk to Kenya and that she had to wait. She wondered whether Kenya would be fine or not. Isshin said that Kaguya seemed to have believed Kenya's act, which was why he had decided to investigate him. However, Kenya's background was completely blank and there was not a single piece of information about him before he entered the school. It seemed as if someone had intentionally erased it. Kenya felt worried because he had not thought about setting up a background for himself at all, as he had assumed it would be randomly generated. Isshin said that he could not deny the possibility that Kenya might be a spy sent by the Empire, so he suggested that they should have a proper conversation about who Kenya really was. Kenya realized that things were going badly and that he had to say something. Isshin glared at him and asked if there was a reason he was unable to speak. Kenya thought anxiously that there was no way they would believe him if he said that he had come from a different world, so he wondered what he should do. Isshin then injected something into Kenya's hand and Kenya wondered what it was. Isshin replied that it was something called truth serum. He said that they were fighting to take back their country, and even though Kenya was just a kid, they would not show him any mercy. He asked Kenya if he felt anything strange and then asked him to tell his real name and where he was from. When Kenya mentioned Tokyo, Isshin thought that perhaps he actually meant Yamato. Isshin then asked where Kenya had learned about them, since their existence was known even in the slums, and whether he had any family involved. Kenya replied that he knew about their existence and about the resistance. He added that there was no one he could call family because he had been abandoned. Isshin was confused to hear that and thought that Kenya might have been an orphan left behind during the war. He then asked about Kenya's objective. As Kenya was about to say something, Kaguya knocked on the door and asked them to open it. A boy tried to stop her, but she entered while shouting at her father that he was using drugs on Kenya. Her father replied that he had already told her not to come there. She became angry and said that although Kenya did not seem to understand boundaries and might have some strange traits, he was not a spy. Isshin shouted at her not to interfere, and said that Kenya might indeed be someone worthy of her approval, and that he himself would like to trust Kenya immediately. However, he explained that he had a duty to reclaim Yamato, and the decision to let Kenya become a member carried the weight of the lives of others in Amaterasu, so they could not trust him so easily. Kaguya agreed with that, and suddenly Isshin pointed his gun at Kenya and asked about his objective. Kenya replied that he wanted to help Kaguya and explained that he had been abandoned, had lost his place in the world, and felt as if nothing mattered to him anymore. He added that he had not been able to save the person who had saved his life when he had been about to end everything. He said that he had come there so that he could save them, and if Isshin believed he could not be trusted, then they were free to shoot him, but he still wished to join them. Those were Kenya's true feelings. Suddenly, Isshin began crying and said emotionally that they had saved the country as the resistance, yet no one knew that there were people like Kenya, among them people who simply wanted to return the favor. He added that he now knew enough. Kenya was confused, and Isshin explained that the drug he had injected earlier was only a small dose of anesthesia and that the side effects would wear off very soon. Others who had been observing through the monitor also relaxed. A girl said that she had known it would turn out that way. A boy commented that everything had been perfect until halfway through, and a third person added that it was fine since they now understood Kenya. Kaguya said that it seemed Kenya had been tricked, and the boy beside her remarked that Isshin had never been good at such things. Isshin then knelt in front of Kenya and apologized for testing him like that, explaining that he had no other choice if he wanted everyone to agree. Kenya was released from the restraints and his hands and legs were freed. He asked Isshin to raise his head, saying that he understood it had been necessary. Isshin felt grateful and extended his hand to welcome him. Kenya accepted and shook his hand, calling him father and saying that he would now be under their care. Isshin replied that it was still too early to say such things. Isshin then took Kenya to show him the surrounding area and explained the situation of the suburbs. He said that the suburbs were mostly like that, unlike the urban areas, and that even after 5 years there were still many places the Empire had not touched. The people of Yamato who were unable to enter the Empire's system lived secretly in places like that. After that, Kenya was taken to another place that Isshin wanted to show him. They entered a giant building and Kenya noticed how dark it was inside. Isshin asked him to wait and said that Kenya would surely be surprised by what he was about to show. He then turned on the lights, and Kenya saw an imperial mass-produced model of the Cog, the only one that was currently operational. Kenya became extremely excited upon seeing the real Cog and wondered why Isshin was showing it to him. Isshin replied that for the operation that would be carried out the next day, he wanted Kenya to support them using that machine. He asked if Kenya could do it and even handed him the key. Kenya eagerly agreed, thinking that it was finally time to ride a real cog instead of the simulators. He climbed inside with great excitement and said that he would try moving it a little. Isshin warned him not to make any flashy movements. As Kenya operated it for a while, Isshin was stunned to see those movements and thought that Kaguya had truly found a genius, and that allowing Kenya to join them might have been a good decision. Kaguya then arrived and asked Kenya how long he was planning to continue and said that if he made so much noise with it, well, everyone would be surprised. Kenya then came out of the machine and Isshin said that they had just been about to finish. Kenya replied to Kaguya that he had simply gotten carried away and that once he touched the real thing, he became very excited. She handed him a bag, and Kenya asked what it was. Kaguya replied that it contained clothes and asked him to change, adding that the side zips were probably fine since her father did not really pay attention to such details. Isshin apologized for that, and Kenya thanked Kaguya. Blushing, she turned her face away and said that he did not need to mention it since she had only done something normal. A few kids then approached her and she said that she had already told them not to come there. However, they replied that Kaguya had been acting differently ever since she returned. Kenya overheard that and asked Kaguya if she had been worried about him. She immediately denied it and said that it was not like that. A girl approached Kaguya and asked who Kenya was. Kenya then introduced himself and said that he was Kaguya's classmate. The kids immediately began assuming that Kenya was Kaguya's boyfriend, but Kaguya was known for having a difficult personality. Kaguya became angry and demanded to know who had said that her personality was difficult. The kids became frightened when they realized she had heard them. They then grabbed Kenya's hand and tried to take him away to play with them. Kaguya wondered where they had even learned such things. Isshin commented that he now somewhat understood why she had brought Kenya there. But introducing a man she had just met to her father seemed a bit too early. She became furious and kicked him, saying that she had kept telling him that it was not like that. After that, Kenya and Kaguya played with the kids. They all had a meal together and even took a bath. Finally, night came, and everyone prepared their beds and slept together in the large hall. Kenya lay down a short distance away, sleeping 2 kids away from Kaguya. When they noticed that everyone had fallen asleep almost instantly after lying down, Kaguya remarked that the kids had been running around so much during the day. She then apologized, saying that she had forced him to come there. Kenya replied that although he had been surprised, he did not mind at all, and that it had been a long time since he had felt so lively, so he was actually very happy. Kaguya thanked him and said that she was really glad to hear him say that. Kenya wondered if she was always so busy. She replied that she had been busy there because all those kids had lost their families during the fight with the Empire, and now that they were around that age, they sought attention. She said that she wanted to do whatever she could for them and hoped that they would at least grow up healthy and strong. Kenya replied that he was sure she would become a great mother in the future. Embarrassed, she quickly turned her face away and told him to stop saying such stupid things and go to sleep, reminding him that there was an important operation the next day. Kenya wished her good, and as he was about to fall asleep, the girl next to him grabbed his hand and called him Papa. Surprised, Kenya said that he was still in high school. The girl, however, seemed to be reminded of her father and asked him not to leave Azusa behind. The next day was a giant ship where preparations were underway. Team A, B, and C of the resistance were all in position and everyone was ready. Ishin said that the success of the operation would be a big step for Yamato, so he asked everyone to stay focused. He then gave the signal to begin the operation to capture the Cog. Kenya was also ready with the Cog. The scene shifted to a chess match between Sieg and Lord, where Sieg stated that he had not yet asked the reason why Lord had come to the academy. Lord replied that the same thing applied to Sieg, as the Cog pilot, who was also known as the War God, was present in the academy. Sieg replied that it was because of regret. Lord was looking for the final piece. He explained that his father, the 99th Emperor, would not last long, as it had been a year since he had been bedridden due to illness. The first prince was Odin. The second was Ymir. And finally there was the third, Lord himself. The three of them were currently the closest to the Emperor. However, since his sister supported his brother, he was left with the last seat and had the highest odds of losing. No matter the case, he simply lacked the pieces that could turn the checkmate around. Sieg stated that no one would catch the eye of a war genius such as Lord, which was why he had come to the academy. Lord replied that students were like rough stones, and he doubted that there was anyone strong enough to be polished like Sieg. He then asked about the meaning of strength. Sieg replied that strength was the ability to believe in oneself. Lord responded that it was a typical answer, but he believed that strength was the will to achieve one's goal, even if it meant changing the world. Just then, he delivered checkmate in the game. All of a sudden, a man entered and called for Sieg, mentioning that there was an emergency report. Sieg stated that the boy should at least knock on the door and that he was currently not the general but the principal before asking about the matter. The boy was shocked to see that Lord was also present, but Sieg said that it was fine and told him to continue. The person then calmed down and reported that from the aircraft that had been scheduled to arrive that day, 10 Kog had been captured. Sieg wondered if there had not been a Cog squad escorting it. The man revealed that all of them had been shot down, and that it had all been done by a single machine. Lord was also surprised to hear such a thing and remarked that it was no joke. The boy then asked to show the footage. They watched as one of the Cog destroyed every escort. Sieg stated that there was a Cog rider who was so skilled in Yamato, or in Colony 13. The person replied that it was the strength of a holy knight. Sieg wondered if there was any possibility that the Cog was special. The man denied it, saying that it was merely a mass-produced machine. Lord thought that he had seen those movements somewhere before, and suddenly he remembered Kenya. After that, he called Sieg and stated that he had already found who was behind it, a rough stone that was shining so bright. He added that he would take care of it himself, and that he already had an idea for it. Sieg relaxed and stated that it might actually be better for them. The person also apologized, but mentioned that it seemed the report had already been passed to the nation. Lord was confused to hear such news. The scene then shifted to the place where the resistance was taking shelter, where everyone cheered for the success of the operation. Ishin told everyone to remember the great significance this held for Amaterasu, stating that being able to obtain such a number of Cog was a huge achievement and that it had only been possible because of everyone's hard work. He especially mentioned that the most valuable person that day was none other than Kenya, and added that if he had not been with them, it might have been impossible for them to succeed in the operation. Everyone appreciated Kenya, mentioning that he was the one who had kept defeating the escort. A girl stated that it was her first time seeing a Cog move like that. One of them mentioned that he had been very anxious when Ishin said he would leave it to an amateur, but it had turned out to be exactly what was expected of Kaguya for choosing Kenya as her boyfriend. Kaguya pointed at him angrily and stated that Kenya was not her boyfriend. Kenya excused himself to Ishin, saying that he would go out to check the bathroom. Ishin agreed, and Kenya left the place while Kaguya seemed confused at that moment. Kenya thought that in the long-awaited real fight, he had been able to show his strength just the same as in the simulation simulator. They had originally thought that they would only capture 2 or 3 machines, but they had succeeded in capturing around 10 of them, and it could even be said that his first operation had been a huge success. He went to check the cog and was glad that it had ended without losing anyone. As he recalled all those events, he suddenly felt something strange, and wondered what it was and why he had chosen to do that himself. Suddenly, Ishin came and patted his back, asking if Kenya was fine. He even offered Kenya some water. Kenya thanked him, and as they sat down, Ishin wondered if Kenya was feeling better now. Kenya agreed and apologized, saying that although he had said he was ready, it might have just been talk. Ishin replied that Kenya did not need to apologize, as he had done his job properly, and Ishin was truly thankful for it. Kenya felt glad to hear that, and Ishin then asked if it had been Kenya's first real fight. Kenya agreed and said that he had been able to move and fight with the cog, just as he remembered. However, the impact of the swords clashing and the huge shockwaves released by the exploding machines were incomparable to the simulator. Everything had felt so heavy, but at that time, he had been so desperate that he had not even thought about the fact that the enemy would die. Ishin said that this was what fights were like. Everyone risked their lives for what they believed was right and for their own objectives, and that applied to everyone on the battlefield. There was no need for Kenya to carry the burden alone. Kenya agreed, and Ishin continued by saying that now that Kenya had gained experience in a real fight, he wanted to ask whether Kenya would stay or quit. Kenya was confused, and Ishin continued by saying that Kenya was still a kid in his eyes. He added that he did not want to force Kenya into it, and that he would respect whatever decision Kenya made. Kenya thought that he had been scared and that his hands had been shaking. He was not even sure whether what he had done was right, but he felt that there was still something he could do. He then stood up and stated that for Kaguya, whom he loved, so that she would no longer have to suffer through such things, he would surely fight. Ishin was shocked to hear that, and Kenya realized it and wondered if he had said something strange. Ishin denied it and thought that Kaguya had truly brought a great person. He then welcomed Kenya once again. Kenya grabbed his hand and said that he would be in Ishin's care. Ishin then said that he had some advice for Kenya as someone who had stood on the battlefield. He said that if Kenya ever found himself in doubt, he should remember the strong feelings within him and his objective, which should never change, neither wavering nor fading. Kenya thought about those strong feelings and believed that he would have to find a way to save Raina. He then rested his head on Ishin's shoulder, and Ishin said that those feelings would be what supported them. Finally, he realized that Kenya had relaxed and would rest. Kaguya was walking away from there when Ishin called her. She came over and wondered if he had noticed. Ishin agreed and asked why her face was completely red. She shouted that it was nothing and said that it was just a bit hot. Ishin said that Kenya had fallen asleep from being so tired and asked Kaguya to take his place while he went to shower the others with more appreciation. She agreed, and while she was sitting there, Kenya rested his head on her lap. She wondered if he was actually awake as he called her name while sleeping. She thought that it was fine for a short time and mentioned that Kenya was really a strange person, but she was very thankful to him for fighting with. As she sat there, she wished him good. The success of the cog capture option would open a road to their destruction, something they still did not know. Meanwhile, someone was crushing enemies while telling them to listen as their death was coming. The person sitting inside a cog mentioned that even if those people had 10 cogs, it was a waste of treasure. He heard that everything was almost done and was praised for doing a good job. He also learned that a report regarding Colony 13 would soon arrive and that Kenya would have to clean up the mess there, which he thought would be quite fun. The scene then shifted to Sieg, who was angry as he asked Lord why Princess Emir had done that and whether it was because they had loosened military control. Lord replied that Sieg had a good instinct for something. He added that Emir was going to Colony 13. Sieg mentioned that on the battlefield where Emir had set foot, more blood than necessary had been shed, and said that perhaps he should go to see her, since it had been a while. Once Sieg was sitting while having tea and thinking that since Emir had been added, there had been a mysterious cog. When he had become the military attaché of the garrison at Colony 13, he had been confused about what he should do. Raina then called him, and he apologized as he snapped out of his thoughts. Raina mentioned that she was going now, and since she had morning training, Sieg wondered if she was training with that guy again. She agreed, mentioning that she would surely win. He asked her to take care on her way and asked about having a mock battle with her that day since it had been a while. Raina replied that she would be late again that night, so perhaps they should do it next time. After that, Sieg became angry as he thought that Raina was now having so much fun talking about a boy every day, whereas in the past, she would not even give the time of day to any man other than him. She was already at that age. Alfred had also been complaining about something, and it seemed that Lord had his eyes on Kenya as well, so he decided to confirm that by himself. Before the battle, while Kaguya was standing there, Sieg also went there, startling her, and Pelosa whistled at it. Raina was about to call him Papa, but suddenly called him Principal instead and wondered why he was there. Sieg replied that he just wanted to see how much of a man the one Raina talked about every morning was. When he mentioned every morning, Raina blushed and said that every morning was an overstatement. Kaguya became worried, thinking that it did not seem like their background had been exposed. Sieg then looked at Kenya and wondered if he was that rumored guy, and it seemed that his daughter was being taken care of well. He wondered if this was the one Raina had found, as Kenya seemed weak, and Sieg also did not see anything special about him. Suddenly, Sieg challenged Kenya to a battle, and Kenya was shocked because he had not even known that something like that had happened in the game. For their battle, they chose the urban area field, and Kenya wondered if it seemed more like a real fight. It was Sieg's first time fighting in an urban area, and as it was his first time there, he asked if Kenya was ready. He rushed forward, saying that he might have stepped back from the front lines but had continued his training, so they should go all out against each other. Kenya was excited about the fight as well. Kenya attacked first, and Sieg replied that it would not work against him. He then launched 2 attacks and wondered if that was all Kenya had. Kenya struggled, thinking that Sieg was a superior fighter, and it would be bad for him if Sieg closed the distance with his pacing. Sieg then noticed that Kenya stepped back and became confused, wondering if Kenya was sure about dropping his cannon and fighting with just a single sword, as his ability would surely show. Kenya replied that it was the reason he was using the sword. Kaguya felt that it was very cocky. She had heard that Sieg was so strong that he was even known as the war god, but it was her first time witnessing. She then asked Raina about her point of view. Raina replied that she actually did not know much about it, as she had lost all her memories of her life until she was 10 years old, and it was her adoptive father, the war god, who had taken her in. That was why she did not know her father from before that time. She also had not been shown any data about his active duty either. Even though it had only ever been in simulations, she had never seen her father lose. Kaguya was surprised, and Raina wondered if something was wrong. Kaguya denied it and said that she understood, realizing at that moment that Raina was adopted. Sieg struck at Kenya with the Sonic Fang, and as Kenya felt it, he became even more excited. Sieg mentioned that Kenya had handled it on his first try, which was impressive. The battle continued, and Kenya was attacked by Sieg, who thought that the shield would not last much longer. Suddenly the shield broke, and Sieg realized that he had been baited as Kenya attacked with his sword. As Sieg dodged the slash, he even kicked Kenya, saying that it was no wonder Raina had been having a hard time and that it had been a while since he had been damaged like that. He guessed that this was the limit for a mass-produced type. Kenya thought that it was as expected of the war god and mentioned that he had not expected Sieg to take one of his legs. They both struck at each other and said that they should end it there. Both of their HP dropped to 0 at the same time, and it ended in a draw. Sieg was shocked and then slammed Kenya on the back, appreciating him. Kenya was surprised by it all. Raina asked Sieg how it had been. Sieg showed that his hands were still shaking after the battle. Kaguya appreciated Kenya, saying that it had been amazing, though she still felt that he had not gone all out yet. She then asked him to be careful. Kenya revealed that he had simply gotten carried away and that Sieg had his own position to consider. Lord came by applauding Kenya and appreciated him, stating that even though it had been a mock battle, he had been on the edge of his seat. Everyone was surprised to see him, and Raina along with Kaguya showed their respect, wondering why he was there. Lord replied that he had heard there were people who stayed behind after school to train, which was why he had become interested and came to watch. Kaguya began sweating, thinking that it might mean Lord had even heard their conversation during the fight. Lord told her not to worry, as he had not heard the conversation and was more curious about Kenya. He said that he had been surprised that Kenya had the power to hold Sieg to a draw and that he had been a fan of Kenya ever since he had seen his first fight. Kenya was truly shocked, as Lord extended his hand toward him for a handshake. Kenya understood Sieg doing something like that, but had not expected Lord to do it. Kenya wondered whether he would regret shaking hands with Lord. Lord replied that it was something Kenya would have to decide for himself, and that his hand was certainly stained with blood. Kenya thought that he did not know much about Lord, since he had not been involved in the game. There was certainly some kind of catch to it, but Kenya felt that the handshake might determine something for him in the future, and might even give him a new route. His hands trembled as he thought that it might be his gut feeling as a gamer, but he would take any flag if it meant saving the heroines. He thought about royalty as the second class, the ruler, and the outcast, and that this encounter between the two would set in motion a fateful battle that would engulf the entire world. Kenya then shook his hand, thinking about how long it had been since he had received a handshake. Lord then stated that he would take his leave and said that Kenya was truly interesting. As he left, he told Sieg that Kenya's skills were perfect, and that he should leave the matter to him. Sig agreed and mentioned that after seeing Kenya's skills, he had a favor to ask of him. Kenya was confused, thinking that it was an event he had not known about either, but it could be his chance to enter the Empire, so he would have to jump in. He then stated that it would be fine if he could do it. Kaguya felt worried for him, thinking that even though they had been smiling while talking, they were still enemies, and Kenya did not seem to realize it. She wondered how many lives he thought had been taken. Sig took Kenya away, apologizing to Raina and Kaguya for a while. Kenya said that it seemed Sig had some business with him, so he would be leaving. Raina replied that it was fine and told him not to worry, but Kaguya thought about stopping Kenya some. Suddenly, Kenya noticed that she had grabbed his shirt, so he wondered if something was wrong. As she hesitated, Kenya teased her, telling her not to worry and asking if she wanted to spend more time with him. She blushed and said that it was not like that. Kenya then said that he had just been kidding and that he would be going now. She felt confused and wondered why she could not just say it honestly. Raina replied that Kaguya did not have to worry about Kenya, as she could assure her that just because Kenya was second class, Raina's father, Sig, would not treat him unfairly. Kaguya responded that it was not like she had been worried, but she remembered something from the recent past. All of a sudden, Raina hugged her, which made Kaguya cry as she wondered what had happened. Raina said that Kaguya had been shaking and mentioned that Raina's father would do the same for her whenever she felt anxious, and it always made her feel calm. Then Raina patted Kaguya on the head and said that everything would be fine. Kaguya thought about personal boundaries and felt that it was not like she did not feel good, but she should not get so close to Raina, who was someone from the Empire. She then gently pushed Raina away, saying that she was fine now. She added that Raina only needed to take it easy and that Kaguya would surely win next time. Raina appreciated her spirit. Sig took Kenya to a place and revealed that it was the Cog Research Center owned by Asgard. Kenya was surprised and asked if it was fine for a second-class person like him to enter there. Sig replied that he had already told him that Kenya could use whatever he wanted. Kenya noticed a person lying there as if he were dead, and Sig said that it was normal. He then called out to the tech chief, and the person suddenly woke up upon hearing his voice. The man apologized, saying that he had been somewhat sleep-deprived recently, and then wondered about the reason Sig had come. Sig revealed that he had brought good news, as he had been thinking about making Kenya work there. The chief Tanaka looked at Kenya and said that he should at least be someone as capable as Raina if he were to be compared with her. Sig then took Tanaka aside and told him that everything was fine, as he had already received approval and could guarantee that Kenya's skills were excellent. Tanaka agreed and introduced himself, mentioning that everyone called him the tech chief. Kenya also introduced himself while shaking hands with him. Tanaka explained that they mainly performed repairs on damaged cogs, and in between repairs they also developed new weaponry or models. Kenya wondered if it was really fine for a second-class person to help with cog research. Tanaka replied that he had been researching cogs for the Empire since before the war, and that Sig had taken care of many things for him. Sig then asked about a particular machine and wondered where it was. Tanaka replied that it should be back soon. Kenya was confused, and suddenly they felt something land in front of them with tremendous pressure, which startled Kenya. Tanaka said that things had been like that lately. Sig wondered if that was really fun. Kenya felt the intense pressure, and when he looked at the cog, he wondered if it was Takemikazuchi. Tanaka explained that it was a prototype still under development. It was the latest 6th-generation machine, but after packing it with so many features, it had become something an average pilot could not handle, so they had not been able to gather much data from it. Kenya thought that it was his favorite machine and the fastest one, the one to which he had dedicated all his youth. Sig said that he was sure Kenya already knew this, but asked if Kenya would like to be a test pilot for that machine. Kenya became excited and thanked Tanaka, saying that he was glad to see it there and that he could ride it again. He then clenched his fist toward the cog and said that he would happily do it. While Kenya was trying the newest cog to dodge the attacks from the nearby machines, he put it through the mobility test as well as the flight performance test. Tanaka was very happy to see it and mentioned that the maneuvering was ideal and that they could proceed with the adjustments. They observed that Kenya was extremely fast, and they thought that the way he could ride the machine so well was amazing. They wondered how Kenya was feeling at the moment, and since everything seemed good, Kenya decided to test the functionality they had talked about. He agreed to give it a try. A boy told Tanaka to hold on because it had not been adjusted yet. Tanaka replied that this was exactly the reason why they had to do it, and that it would be completed shortly. He thought that he did not know what Kenya truly was, but Kenya might be able to accomplish it. After some time, an aircraft landed nearby. Sig did not seem happy to see it. From the aircraft, Ymir came out and greeted them. She came to see Sig and mentioned that it had been a long time since they had met. Sig bowed to greet her and welcomed her to Colony 13. Ymir went to sit in a meeting and wondered where all the enemies were located. She learned that the group was Amaterasu, which appeared to be leading everything. A boy explained to everyone that the members of Amaterasu were believed to be hiding somewhere in the slums of the Kanto region, although their exact location was still uncertain. Ymir said that they already knew that much and asked why they were taking so long, wondering why they were acting so timidly. She ordered them to clean out all the slums so that the enemies would be forced out. She asked her knight, Gillian, if he thought the same. Gillian had no other choice but to agree with her word. Sieg looked at Gillian and thought that he had heard that Gillian had recently become a holy knight, but having to serve as Ymir's knight seemed somewhat pitiful. A person told Ymir that such actions would cause casualties among ordinary people as well, and that she should consider it. She did not say anything, and simply stood up from her seat. Sieg thought that he had been careless and should not have brought a former Yamato soldier in front of Ymir. Ymir asked the man to repeat what he had said. As the man was about to speak, she stopped him and stepped very close, giving him a cold stare and asking what he thought he had been saying. She pointed at the badge on his shirt and mentioned that he was still only a second class. Suddenly, she stabbed the pen in her hand into him, causing him intense pain. Everyone else remained silent as the man screamed in agony. Ymir asked him what he thought he was talking about. As he was about to say more, she shouted that there were no humans there, only livestock, entities that could die depending on how she felt. She said that they were merely stray dogs who could do nothing but abandon their country and wag their tails at. The man begged her to reconsider. She then pulled the pen out, saying that it excited her to see his hard work despite being a dog. Two men grabbed the hands of the man she had been speaking to, and she took out her long whip, saying that she would make him realize his place once again. She struck his chest once and said they would see how long he could endure. After several hits, she wondered what was wrong and asked whether he was not going to beg as he had earlier. Sieg tried to stop her, but suddenly Lord entered and asked her to leave it to him. He thanked Ymir for coming all the way there. Ymir became happy upon seeing Lord and hugged him, mentioning that he had suddenly said he wanted to rule over Colony 13, which had made her feel lonely. Lord replied that he was also a member of the royal family, so with their father currently absent, it was only natural for him to step forward. She said that she liked his spirit, but remarked that it seemed they had been doing whatever they wanted the entire time and did not appear to be properly disciplined. Lord replied that it was the result of his own shortcomings. Ymir stated that Lord could rest easy now, as she was there and would show him what it meant to be a strong lord. Lord told her that she should set out for the mission. She agreed, and revealed that she had even brought Regina along, and that her troops would be arriving shortly as well. She added that it would be a shame if she did not personally join such an exciting hunt. Lord replied that it was exactly as expected of her and that he would certainly learn from her. Ymir revealed that she was still trying to create a good impression for Alfred and said that she would leave the operational preparations to him. He thanked her by bowing. As she was about to leave, Lord remarked that it seemed Sieg had something to say. Sieg agreed and said that he knew it would be a disrespectful request, but he asked whether they could try to shed as little blood as possible. Others also asked Lord. Lord replied that he understood and said that Jantelets would take care of it as quickly as possible, as he had no interest in matters like that. A few days passed. Kenya was lying on his bed feeling extremely tired. He reminded himself that he was a student during the day, an autodidact and test pilot after school, and an aide to the resistance and the slums on weekends. Although his everyday life with Koji and the heroines he loved was very fun, it was still quite difficult for someone who had been a NEET not long ago. He knew that his techniques were good, but his body still remembered the sensation of controlling Take Mikazuki, and he hoped in that level someday. Still, he wondered what do next. As he was able to approach both the Empire and the Resistance, he felt that it was truly difficult to be the main character. All of a sudden, Kenya received a call. He picked it up and asked how Raina had called him, as it was very rare for her to do so. She hesitated to speak, so Kenya wondered if something was wrong. She mentioned that the next day she would be taking the day off for personal reasons. She asked him to cancel the morning training for that day. Kenya was surprised and said that she could have simply texted him, but he was really happy that he had called. She agreed, but still seemed hesitant to say something. Kenya wondered if there was something else she wanted to talk about. She hesitated and said that she wanted to ask what he thought Kaguya thought of her. Kenya was confused, and she explained that everyone kept their distance from her, calling her the daughter of the war god or the ice princess, and that she herself still did not know much about socializing with others, yet Kaguya would face her directly. She said that Kaguya was a person of the Empire, and it somehow felt amusing whenever she watched her. Kenya said that it might just be his opinion, but perhaps that was what someone would call a friend and a rival. Raina replied that she would be glad if Kaguya saw her that way. Kenya then asked what Raina meant by that aside from himself. She told him to look at the time and asked him to inform Kaguya as well. Kenya agreed and was about to ask more because he felt that there was definitely something else, but Raina said she did not want to talk about it and said goodbye. The call ended, and Raina was sitting on her bed crying and feeling sorry. Kenya, on the other hand, thought that Raina had been acting strangely and guessed that she might have caught a cold. He was very sleepy and thought that he just needed to tell Kaguya that the next day's training was cancelled. The next day when Kenya woke up, he was still thinking about Raina's call, which was bothering him. He felt that he had experienced that feeling before, but he could not remember where. Suddenly, after brushing his teeth and washing his face, he realized that it indicated the beginning of the event, 1 versus 100 Cog. However, he was confused and wondered if it was happening too soon since they were still in the early stage of the game, and he questioned whether his actions had accelerated the progress of the route. He also remembered that if things followed the game, the Empire's cogs would attack the slums, and by the time Kenya arrived there, everything would already be destroyed. Not only the resistance, but many ordinary people would also be killed. Kenya rushed out of his building, thinking that he had to hurry. He called Kaguya, and she shouted that he should inform her earlier if there was going to be no morning training. Kenya apologized and said that there was no time to talk about that as they had to go meet her father. She was confused, and Kenya asked about her location. She replied that she was already near the school and said that if something happened, those people would contact them. She also added that going there would be risky and that they would contact them if anything came up. Suddenly, Kenya arrived and grabbed her shoulder, saying that he was not joking and that if they did not go, everyone would be in danger. She noticed that Kenya was trembling. He looked extremely desperate and asked her to trust him. She agreed, and the two of them took a truck to leave from there. She said that she would rush ahead and that Kenya should prepare himself. Kenya replied that disguise was one thing, but asked whether they could not get a faster car. Kaguya responded that driving a car as a second class was suspicious enough and that the truck was all they had to sneak past the Empire. Regardless, she urged him to hurry up and use his device. Finally, it connected. Kenya was happy to hear their voices and said that he was glad they were all safe. Ishin replied that it seemed they had been caught by the Empire and that Princess Ymir was leading them. Kaguya was shocked to hear this. Kenya thought that he already knew it was a losing event, but he had never expected that even Princess Ymir would appear. Ishin told them that they should not come. However, Kaguya revealed that they were already on the way and said that they should discuss the details. Kaguya then informed Ishin that Kenya had told Ishin that they would fight as well. Kenya asked Ishin to hold on until they arrived to help. After they disconnected from Ishin, he heard an announcement from Ymir. She declared that it was a message to the resistance members who were hiding, stating that if they refused to surrender, they would all be considered scoundrels who had threatened their territory. She ordered them to turn themselves over without resisting and added that if they did so, she would spare their lives and they would simply be executed. As Kenya and Kaguya arrived at the area, they found that everything had already been destroyed. Kenya was shocked because they had not made it in time. He became confused about what he should do next, while Kaguya was also completely stunned. Suddenly, they heard a sound and saw that a cog was chasing a group of kids, telling them to call out the resistance or they would all be killed. A few attacks were launched at the machine, and Kenya and Kaguya watched the situation, realizing that things were bad and that they needed to save the kids first. As Kenya was about to rush forward, Kaguya stopped him and pointed out that the opponent was a cog. She asked what he thought would happen if he charged in with just his body. Kenya hesitated because they could not simply abandon the kids. Kaguya agreed, but said that she had brought something with them for such a situation. Meanwhile, the cog stood in front of the children in a narrow area and wondered if everything was finished, saying they just needed to run a little longer until the resistance came out. One boy wondered whether everyone else had escaped. Another replied that there were many little ones and that he did not know. A third boy said they would stand their ground until the very end. They all shouted that they were not afraid of the cog and asked whether he was not ashamed of himself for using children as bait. The cog struck the wall behind them and shouted for them to shut up, saying the only thing they were allowed to do was scream louder. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a horn and saw a truck driving toward him. The cog warned the vehicle to stop, but it kept moving. He fired at it, yet it continued to advance. With Kaguya pressing the switch below, 2 more explosions suddenly erupted around the area. The cog was confused by the smokescreen and remarked that the resistance must have finally arrived. The kids were also confused and wondered whether it might be the uncle and the others. Kenya and Kaguya rushed to them and told them to run away immediately. As the children escaped, Kenya thought that Kaguya was amazing because she remained calm even in such a situation, and he could barely keep up with her. He felt that everyone would be safe now. However, Kenya suddenly noticed that a girl had fallen behind. He went to check on her, wondering if something was wrong. He was worried because he could not see anything clearly through the smoke. The cog became angry about the trick with the truck. Sensing Kenya's presence, it fired toward him. Kenya was worried and hurried toward the girl, but it seemed he would not make it in time. All of a sudden, another cog appeared and shielded the girl, then struck the attacking machine. Kenya rushed forward and hugged the girl, who began crying and said that she had been very scared. Kenya told her that everything was fine now and that she had held on well. Kaguya felt relieved to see that everyone was safe. Ishin also arrived and checked on everyone, saying he was glad that he had made it in time. Kaguya asked about the injuries he had. Ishin replied that it was nothing serious and explained that the princess's guards had arrived, so he had to push himself a bit. The kids asked about the others at the orphanage, and Ishin revealed that they were all under protection. He praised the children for their courage and efforts. However, he also said that they were not completely safe yet because some enemies had fled and scattered around. Kenya called out to Ishin and said that he would take care of the cog. Ishin wondered what Kenya was planning to do. Kenya thought that he truly had to do it, and said that it was the reason he was there. He declared that they had accepted someone like him even though he had stepped into the place where everyone belonged, so he would defeat all the enemies. Ishin agreed, and told him to hold out until all the civilians had evacuated and to draw the enemy's attention away from them. Kenya agreed. Kaguya felt a chilling sensation because Kenya seemed different from how he normally was. Kenya simply gave her a thumbs up and said that he was leaving everyone to her. Then he stepped forward with the Knight of Fury, thinking that he had to defeat them all. While Gillian and Amir were standing there watching the injured people, a cog came to attack them, but they defeated it easily. Ymir called out to Gillian and wondered if those were the resistance members from the footage because they looked so weak. Gillian replied that one of them was very special. Ymir then wondered if, even after they had killed so many, that special one would still not come out. Gillian was contacted by someone and wondered if they had found something. The person on the other side replied that Point H was under attack and there was only a single enemy. Gillian told Ymir that the one from the rumors had finally arrived. As a cog appeared in front of them, Ymir remarked that it must be the one they had been talking about. She then asked if it meant they would have to use that bunch of trump cards. Kenya was inside that cog and said that he only needed to hear from them why she had killed non-resisting people and civilians. Ymir calmly replied that it was an interesting thing for him to say and that he seemed to be looking at it from the wrong angle. She added that they were nothing but livestock and pigs in the guise of humans. She then shouted and wondered if she really needed permission to hunt down some pigs. Kenya became angry and said that if she was that kind of person, then it was great because he could fight them without any hesitation. Ymir then ordered Gillian to drag him out of there, but not to kill him, as she wanted to educate him herself. Gillian agreed and went to attack Kenya. Kenya used Night Maneuver to cut Gillian's cog and even used Mirage of the Phantom Slash to create a blast against him, after which Gillian apologized to Ymir. Kenya also apologized, saying that he had mastered dealing with them a long time ago. Ymir was shocked that Gillian had been defeated in a single hit and said that Kenya might have just become a holy knight, but he was still her knight. She wondered who Kenya really was. Kenya replied that he was simply a gamer. As he charged toward her with two swords, she thought that Kenya was getting ahead of himself by charging at her. She believed that as soon as he came within her range, his defeat would be confirmed. As she attacked him, he dodged one strike, and she continued attacking while using adhesive bullets to stop his movement. She then thought that Kenya would no longer be able to use that speed. She slashed at his neck, but Kenya dodged again and blocked her attack with his sword. She was shocked and said that it was impossible. Kenya said that she must be afraid of losing or dying, and that it was the same feeling experienced by everyone she had killed. Ymir wondered if she was really afraid of a single pig. As Kenya continued attacking her, she became frightened and thought that she needed to kill more to take everything away. Kenya then pointed his sword at her and said that, according to her own rule, the defeated must obey the victor. He added that since she had laid her hands on those precious people to him, he would not forgive her, whether she was a princess or not. He shouted that she was a human who must not be allowed to live. Just as Kenya was about to strike, another cog came and attacked him, leaving him confused. That cog told Ymir to retreat and said that she would take over from there. Kenya was shocked when he heard the voice, realizing that it belonged to Raina, and he wondered why she was on the battlefield. Ymir asked Raina for her name, and when Raina replied, Ymir said she would remember it. As she flew away, Kenya was confused about why Raina was there. While leaving, Ymir also said that Kenya should wait because she would come back soon. Kenya tried to attack her, saying that he would not let her go. However, Raina blocked his way and wondered why she would be fighting for someone like that. Raina felt sorry for her father, but she needed to confirm things for herself. She remembered the day before the operation when she had been walking through the corridor and heard Sieg talking. She thought it was rare for her father to raise his voice and wondered if something was wrong. Sieg was telling someone on the call that he did not want to do anything that would provoke an uprising, as Colony 13 had finally settled down. He said that if they allowed Princess Ymir to roam freely on the battlefield, she might massacre all the civilians in the slums. At that rate, they had better make sure to brief the soldiers to keep casualties to a minimum. After he ended the call, Raina interrupted him and mentioned the conversation she had overheard. He wondered if she had heard everything. She apologized and admitted that she had. Sieg replied that it did not matter and explained that the planned operation had suddenly been scheduled for the next day. It would be led by Princess Ymir, who would hunt down the resistance. He added that recently the resistance activity had been increasing in various places, and just the other day, a cog transport had been ambushed and its escort had been taken out by a single cog. The operation aimed to neutralize that person who was so skilled. As Raina looked at the footage, she remembered Kenya and Kaguya, but wondered why the two of them had been going somewhere together. She thought it might just be a coincidence and was not sure about it. She then asked her father if she could participate in the operation as well. Sieg replied that Ymir would be in the vanguard and that the operation would probably not end without casualties. Therefore, whether there were civilians around or not would become irrelevant. And as her father, he would not allow Raina to participate. Raina replied that Sieg and Lord would do their best to prevent that. Sieg asked if she was really sure, and she said that she wanted to help them. Sieg finally agreed, saying that he could use all the help he could get. However, he asked her to stay out of direct combat and limit herself to supporting the cog unit, as he was sure there was a lot she could learn by observing the battlefield. Raina thanked him for it. After that, she went to get a cog. The others were shocked because a cog had appeared that had already taken down 5 of them. It was the one everyone had been talking about lately, and it seemed to be heading toward Ymir's squad. Raina understood that the cog was trying to take down Ymir, so she entered a cog after apologizing for borrowing it. The owner was shocked and asked what she was doing, but she did not listen and left with the cog, hoping that it was not Kenya. The scene returned to the present. No matter how much she wished it was not Kenya, the more their swords clashed, the more convinced she became that it was him. She called out to the resistance pilot and told him to withdraw. She said that his anger was justified, but the encirclement had been broken, and he should be able to escape. She added that if he killed Ymir there, the Empire would turn its full might toward rooting out the resistance, and he should understand that and act rationally. When Kenya did not answer, she became confused and continued by saying that if he refused to back down, she would have no choice but to stop him with her sword. Kenya thought that he understood Raina's logic, but even if he did not kill Ymir, she would channel the wrath she had accumulated that day to brutally annihilate the resistance and the people of Yamato. That was why he felt sorry, because he had to kill Ymir no matter what. He could not hold back against Raina, and even if he had to cut off her limbs, he would still move forward. As the fight continued, Lord Sieg and another man were watching this. They received a report that the evacuation of civilians would be completed shortly. Lord ordered them to proceed to the next area and thought that the target of that cog was his sister, as she certainly knew how to make herself the target. Suddenly, Lord was contacted by Ymir, who said that she had run into the rumored cog and that it had even taken down Jillian. She explained that she had managed to escape from the front, but her cog had been destroyed. Lord replied that they would retrieve her immediately. He then told Sieg that his sister had encountered a cog and that her machine had been trashed and immobilized. Sieg wondered if they should send a retrieval squad, but Lord denied it, saying that it would only upset Ymir more. He decided that he and Sieg would go themselves. Sieg agreed, and when they went to check on Ymir, he was shocked to see such severe damage on Ymir's massive armored machine for the first time. Lord asked Ymir if she was fine. She became happy to see that he had come to rescue her. Letting her guard down, she said that she had not expected Kenya to defeat Jillian. She asked them to prepare another cog for her, saying that she would not mess up again. Lord looked confused and said that if the worst happened, she should leave it to him. Ymir refused, saying that she could not let it remain a loss and that she would personally make Kenya suffer a fate worse than death with her own hands. She added that she still could not understand how he had been so aware of her fighting style, and if that girl, Raina, had not appeared, she might have died. Sieg was shocked to hear his daughter's name, and Ymir said that there was no way Raina would make it out of there in one piece if she faced Kenya. Sieg was stunned, but Lord told him to calm down and said that he did not need to worry about Raina because everything was exactly as he had imagined. Ymir asked what he meant by that. Suddenly, Lord shot Ymir in the leg, causing her to fall. He was confused and asked what it meant. Sieg was also confused and asked what Lord was doing. Lord said that Princess Ymir regrettably had been killed while fighting the resistance and wondered how that would sound. Ymir was confused and asked what he was saying. Lord replied that it meant exactly what it sounded like. She asked if he was going to kill her and demanded to know the reason. Lord replied that it should have been obvious, as she was a wretch who regarded people as nothing more than pigs, and he had always hated her. He apologized to Sieg for getting him involved in this, but said that he had already made up his mind. Sieg told him not to worry, saying that he had also decided to follow Lord, that there was no one in the Empire who could stop Ymir, and as long as she lived, unnecessary people would continue to be killed. He said that he wanted to stop that completely, and at the very least, he would end her personally, which was his obligation as her brother. Ymir became furious and tried to attack him, asking who he was to say that to her, since the number of people she had killed paled in comparison to him. She revealed that ever since she was born, she had been bound by the affairs of the royal family and surrounded by people who had their eyes on the throne. Even her own blood had not helped her, and they had merely ordered her to conquer the world. That was why she had continued conquering and killing. She said that her only fault was that she had been born a princess, and that everything she had done had been for the Empire. As she tried to drag herself forward, she asked if Lord was saying that she was to blame and told him not to blame her, but the world that had made her that way. She said that it had always been kill or be killed, and that living peacefully had never been an option. There was no way she would end up dying there, at the hands of her own brother. She remembered the past when she had first met Lord. She had introduced herself with a handshake, saying that she was glad to have a little brother like him, and asking him to get along with her. The scene returned to the present when a bullet was fired next to Ymir, confusing her. There was another figure of Lord who asked why he was missing his shots and whether he really thought he could achieve his goal like that. The real Lord struggled and said that he had to do it. The second figure replied that he did not have to be so cruel, and after existing for so long, he had already made up his mind to do such things. That was how everything had always been done. Sieg could not see that second figure of Lord, but felt that something was definitely wrong. Ymir laughed as she looked into Lord's eyes, which were exactly like their father's. Lord then bid her farewell and fired the bullet. The scene shifted to the battlefield where Kenya and Raina were clashing with each other, and Kenya eventually made her fall. She felt that it was completely different from the simulator and realized that this was what a real fight was. She wondered how much he had been going easy on her until now. Kenya flew into the sky while Raina realized that this was what Kenya was truly capable of. Kenya thought that Raina had become much stronger after all the training, but he had already disabled her sword and flight capabilities, so she would not be able to chase him any longer. Kenya was contacted by Ishin, who asked if he was fine and informed him that they had finished evacuating the civilians. Kenya was glad to hear that. Ishin continued by thanking Kenya for distracting the enemies and said that only they were left now. He also mentioned that Kaguya had been very worried about Kenya and told him to hurry back. Kenya agreed and said that he would return immediately. He left Raina behind and began to leave. Raina asked him to stop, but she could not reach him, and Kenya flew away. She felt that everything between them was now over. When Kenya returned to the civilians, Ishin welcomed him and wondered about his awkward reaction. Suddenly, Kaguya ran forward and hugged Kenya, saying that she had been very worried about him. Kenya thought that it had been worth giving his all. Kaguya called him an idiot, but Ishin interrupted their emotional reunion and told them to get back to work. Kaguya felt embarrassed and pushed Kenya away, saying that she had only been checking whether he was injured and told him to move away. Kenya replied that she did not have to be so serious. Ishin explained that they had evacuated the civilians through an old underground railroad and that the Empire would not pursue them that far. He then asked Kenya for his report. Kenya apologized and said that he had been close to taking down Princess Ymir, but many unexpected things had happened, and he could not finish the job. Ishin replied that the Empire's movements seemed to have quieted down. If he was correct, then Kenya's actions had disrupted their operation. They could not let that chance pass and should get everyone out of the battlefield while they could. At that moment, someone called Ishin and said that there was terrible news. They showed a broadcast in which a man delivered a message to the resistance. He said that despite their pledge to spare lives and grant mercy to those who surrendered, Princess Ymir had fallen on the battlefield. He added that anyone who murdered imperial nobility deserved death 1,000 times over, and that they no longer even had the right to be third-class citizens. Therefore, they would now be under the command of Lord, and the annihilation of the resistance would begin. Kenya was shocked to hear that news and wondered what would happen now that Ymir had been killed by someone else. In the original game, she did not even appear until much later, so Kenya was confused about what was going on. Another person informed Ishin that reconnaissance had just reported a large number of COG units heading toward them, around 30 in total. Kenya realized that there was no time to turn back. He told Ishin that he would lure them away and buy time so the resistance could escape. Kaguya was shocked and said that Kenya could not do it. She even asked Ishin to tell him that no matter how strong he was, it was impossible. However, Ishin replied that they had already seen those eyes before and that they belonged to someone who had already made up his mind. Kaguya began crying and wondered why Kenya was the only one who had to suffer. She apologized to him, saying that she was sorry for being so weak. Kenya comforted her that she should not apologize, adding that he was actually happy because he could fight for the sake of everyone. Kaguya cried and said that she had not joined him in the fight. Kenya said that he had already made up his mind and asked Ishin if he should go. Ishin agreed and handed him a gun, saying that he fully acknowledged Kenya's resolve. He added that it was painful, but they had no choice except to rely on him. Ishin then asked Kenya to promise that no matter what happened, he should never give up on his life. He reminded Kenya that when they had first met, Kenya had said that he had no one he could call family, but that was not true because all of them were his family. Kenya agreed with him. Kaguya thought that once again it was a moment when she could do nothing, and she wondered if she would ever truly become stronger the way she had resolved to be. Still, she realized that if she let Kenya leave like this, she would regret it forever if she did not tell him how she felt. Just then, she called out to Kenya and suddenly kissed him on the lips, leaving Kenya completely confused.